Today's video is a long-term review of the Canon BG-R10 vertical grip for the R5 and R6 cameras. What's up everyone, Pete Coco here, hope you're doing well. Before we get started, please gently tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment if you like what you hear and see. So today we're talking all about this accessory, the Canon vertical grip BG-R10 for the EOS R5 and R6 cameras. I've had this accessory for about 9 months now, and I've used it extensively in my studio and out of my studio, and I feel like I have some good insights on the product and whether or not you should pick one up if you own an R5 or R6 camera. So today I'm basically going to give you a pros list and a cons list, and then follow it up with my recommendation whether or not you should get it. Now, I did do another video on this accessory, but it was more of why I felt like you do need it, and it was based really on battery life. So I'll talk a little bit about that here today, but this review is going to give you more of kind of an overall idea of the item, and I'm going to talk about the different features, what I like and what I don't like. So this is a little bit more comprehensive. My conclusion, spoiler alert, will be the same as my other video. So now I'm going to go through this in no particular order and give you my pros and cons, and I'm going to attach it to the camera and we're going to talk about it like that. And the reason why is because I have to start with the first thing that I feel like is a con. And I know that there's no ideal way to do this, but this kind of, in 2022, I feel like there should be a better way. So the first thing I don't like about the grip, and this has been something that I haven't liked about Canon grips for a long time, is that what you have to do is you have to open the battery cover on your camera and then use this little tab to take it off. Then you have to remove the current battery in the camera. Then you have to take your battery cover so you don't lose it and pop it in here. Now, one thing they did do nicely is you don't have to tab it in, it just pops in and out, so that's easier. Then you take the whole assembly, attach to the camera, it's got a screw thread on the back, tighten that, and it's attached. But the next step is you then have to open this, take all of these batteries, click them in there, put it in, and close it. Okay. What I don't like about this is, first of all, I don't like having to take the battery cover off because I've broken them in the past. Probably if you've had a Canon camera for a long time, one of the other models, and you've been, this isn't your first rodeo with one of these grips, you may have done that too. I don't like the fact that I have to take the cover off, take the battery out. It's a lot of steps to get the grip attached and functional. Now, some other companies like Fuji, the grip actually just, there's a terminal on the bottom of the camera, you take a little cover off and it just screws right on. So there's obviously pros and cons to that as well, because then you have more terminals exposed and this and that and covers to deal with. But that's the first con. It's a little bit of a process just to get the thing attached. And if you're like me, I do like removing it quite a bit depending on what I'm shooting, and I'll explain a little bit more later. Okay, now once the grip is attached, basically you now have a huge camera. So unlike your typical tiny, not tiny, but smaller R5, this is now the size of like a 1D kind of camera, or an R3, I guess would be the closest to this. And the point of the grip is to give you more battery life. You have double the amount of battery, and you have a vertical shutter button and also quite a few vertical controls. So you can control your autofocus, you can control your aperture and shutter speed, you can control some other items here, all without having to do this and having to move around. So it's really vertical. That's why they call it a vertical grip. It's great for that. All right, so let's go through really the pros first, now that we got past the battery cover con, and then I'll come back to some of the other cons. So the first pro is the most obvious one. The grip takes 2 batteries. This is the biggest pro for me, and this is what I kind of talked about in my last video on this grip, is that using this tethered in a portrait session, I found that with one battery, the battery did not last an entire session for some of my longer sessions, especially for clients who have headshots and portraits. So lots of times I'll have a headshot session with a client, and then once we finish up the headshots, we take portraits. This could be, quite a long session, And what was happening without the grip is the battery was dying in the middle of me being tethered, which was a big pain in the butt because then I had to change the battery, but then re-tether the camera, and I'm shooting with Capture One, so sometimes it wouldn't want to tether, and it would just become a big frustration. So for me, the biggest pro of this item is now you have 2 batteries that last quite a long time. The next thing I like about this grip is it's built really, really well. It's super solid. It's made well. The control dials and all the buttons and the quality of the materials is right up to par with the camera. So they did a good job making an excellent item that, even though it's quite expensive, it does feel like the quality is premium and that it's going to last and that it's built to the same rugged specs of the camera. So I do like the build quality. And related to the build quality, I like the way it feels. So it feels great. When you use the vertical grip and the vertical shutter, it's excellent. And I don't have huge hands. Usually a smaller camera is okay for me to handle, but I do like a grip that doesn't feel like I'm gonna drop the camera. And this feels excellent, both horizontal and vertical shooting now. So the grip feels great. It's well made. It's got an excellent feeling to it. And that's another thing I like about this item. Another pro, I also like the fact that there are quite a few buttons on here. Now, in the past, a grip, you'd be lucky if you had an exposure lock and a shutter button. But now the camera companies are getting much wiser about what they put on their grips. On this grip, you have aperture and shutter speed command dials. You have a autofocus switch to change modes. You have exposure lock. You have a zoom button and AF on. And my favorite part is this. You have the AF toggle switch. So you don't have to, because you really can't if you're trying to reach like that. I mean, that's not going to make sense. So you have an AF toggle switch. So they do give you a bunch of buttons. I like the fact that you have a lot of options you can control while the camera's in vertical format. Now, outside of the battery life, the best part about this grip is that you can take it off. And I do think that's a great pro about buying a camera like an R5 that has a removable grip. If you purchase a camera like a 1D series or an R3 or an R1, whatever is going to be coming out, those have the grip built in. And there's pros to that, to be sure. But the cons of that is that if you just want to take a smaller camera with you and you don't necessarily need the grip for certain use, you can't take it off. So I think the fact that it is removable, a camera like this, I like having a removable grip. I think it's a great pro. Lots of times if I'm just taking the camera out for some street photography, some family photography, or a day off where I'm just doing stuff for fun, then I ditch the grip and I have the extra battery in my bag and I don't have to worry about it. So I think that's a pro as well. All right, now let's talk about the cons, because there are some cons to this grip that I'd like to share with you. Now, the first con is that this little unlocking lever for the battery cover is super flimsy and I don't like it. And again, this is something that I feel like all the grips have this flimsy little lever. But every time I put the cover on and I lock that into place with this flimsy little plastic release, I feel like I'm going to break it. So that's the one part of the build quality I think that they can do better, and I hope they do better on the next one. Just doesn't feel very substantial. It feels like something I have to be careful with. The plasticky cover itself, the interior bits as well without the batteries in them, also feels a little flimsy. And I understand that you want to keep weight down, so they probably don't want that to be too heavy. So that's not as much of an issue. I feel like when the batteries are in, it's kind of cool. But that little locking lever, just every time I do that, I feel like that's a little cheaply made. Now, the next thing I'm not crazy about with this grip is that it's bulky and heavy. Now, I know I just said it's made well and it's substantial and all of that, so I'm kind of contradicting myself, but that's my prerogative. It's my video. Anyway, it's bulky and heavy. Take it as you may. So you might look at that as a pro. You might look at that as a con. But it does add quite a bit of weight to the camera. And it's not so fun to lug around like that. If I'm using it in the studio and it's on a tripod, then it really doesn't matter. And finally, I think the biggest con of this grip is the button placement. Now, It has a lot of buttons on it, but I just don't feel like they're in the right spots for my fingers, especially the focus joystick. When I go to reach for that, if I want to change a focusing point, I feel like I'm reaching way over and it just doesn't make sense where it is. So I'm not sure why the buttons are where they are. I guess it depends on your hand and it depends on what you're used to most likely. But for me personally, I don't think the buttons have been placed very intuitively. And then if you do want to go for, say, the thumb wheel, which I still like to do even though I know a lot of it is redundant, but the thumb wheel is something I'm just very used to with my Canon cameras. It feels like a big, huge reach to get to there. Now, I don't have huge hands, so that again could just be something with me, but that's how I feel about that. All right, now we come to the heart of the matter. Should you buy this grip if you have an R5 or an R6? And I say, yes, I think you should get it. I feel like it's a necessary item. I don't think it's an accessory. And why? Well, the simple answer is battery life. If you don't have this grip, you're not going to have great battery life, and especially if you shoot in a studio tethered like I do 90% of my time, I need that battery life to be there. I don't want to be messing with changing batteries and tethering problems in the middle of a shoot because it throws off the rhythm, it throws off your client, it throws you off, and it's a pain in the butt. So if you shoot in a studio, if you shoot tethered, I say yes, definitely get this. If you shoot out on location, I still think it's necessary to have for anyone who doesn't want to deal with changing batteries in the middle of a shoot. Now, this does kind of annoy me because I feel like I have to have the grip, not that it's an option. And this is what I ranted about in my last video on this product. It's very expensive and you kind of need it if you're doing any intense shooting where you need the camera just to work for long periods of time, because the batteries are much more intensive in this camera than in a DSLR, which is what I came from when I switched over to this camera. Overall though, it's a great item, it's a great product, they made it very well. The pros to me outweigh the cons. All right everyone, well that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this long-term review. Leave me a comment, gently press that like button, and let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about. Some of the best videos that I've made, I feel like have come from viewer suggestions, so throw me a suggestion. And here's to wishing you an awesome day with your camera. Go out and take some great pictures and just have an excellent day. Bye, everyone.